Well, those who were involved in the campaigns have had plenty of time to reflect on what they did right and, of course, what they did wrong. Will Straw campaigned for the UK to remain in the EU. He was the executive director of the campaign group Britain Stronger In. And on the other side of the fence, Richard Tice was the co-founder of Leave.eu, one of the two major groups that campaigned for Britain to leave the European Union. So what have you made of the last year, Will?
Well, it's certainly been full of surprises, hasn't it, with the general election just a few weeks ago. I think the referendum a year ago had a clear result, and that meant that we were going to leave the European Union. The big question was, what did that mean? Theresa May was very opaque, saying Brexit means Brexit. She then put her version of Brexit to the British people in the general election, and they rejected it. So we're back now into a period where we're not entirely sure what our Brexit strategy looks like. And of course there are a number of people now saying that we need to take a different approach from the quite extreme view of Brexit that Theresa May was suggesting. We need to make sure that we don't end up with no deal, which is one of the things that she said she would be prepared to countenance if there wasn't a deal on the table.
No deal better than a bad deal.
Yeah, I think that's dead in the water. Well, I think it's dead in the water now. Secondly, I think there's a lot of concerns about the border with Ireland, and that means that in Parliament we'll probably stay in the customs union. And then there's a lot of people, the Mayor of London just yesterday, saying that to avoid Britain's economy going off a bit of a cliff edge, we have to have a transition deal at the end of the talks in 2019, and that might mean staying in the single market at least for the short term.
Let's be very clear. Over 80% of the electorate in the general election voted to leave the customs union and to leave the single market, because that's what both manifestos said. The general election was actually about domestic issues, and Jeremy Corbyn did very well, and the Tories didn't do very well. The whole point about this process is that it's taking too long. It's taken far too long to get to where we are today about the offer for EU citizens. You know, that should have been sorted within the first month or 2 months after the referendum.
So why do you think it's taken so long?
Because, well, basically because the Conservative government was willing to make the offer that they're now making today, but the EU said, no, we're not ready to start negotiations.
You've got to wait till that
to be honest, we should have actually shamed them into it.
Anyway,
we are where we are.
Theresa May said it anyway. Couldn't she have said anyway, we're not in negotiations, but do you know what, this is what we'll do?
I think that's right. I said on Question Time last November, that's what she should have done. It was still available. It's taken too long. The whole process from here is still taking too long. In business, you know, if we were negotiating this, you'd sit down, you'd agree it in a month, and you'd put it into lawyers' hands. You know, this idea that they're negotiating, they're spending 1 week negotiating and 3 weeks going back and talking to the media and their respective parties is not the way to give certainty for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Richard and I probably disagree on lots of aspects of the EU debate, but, you know, Richard from the Leave side, me from the Remain side, completely agree that it was outrageous of Theresa May to wait for a year to make this offer about 3 million people. I mean, these are huge things. These partners, husbands and wives, colleagues, and they've been left in limbo for the last year. I mean, actually, I think that, as Richard says, you should have put the EU under pressure and said, look, we are going to unilaterally offer these rights to these people and say, you can stay in this country, and we expect the EU to do the same for other people, for the Brits living abroad, rather than treating these people like a pawn in a chess match.
Is the problem now going forward that because Theresa May has a minority government, she hasn't got that huge landslide which she obviously hopes to be able to go to these EU negotiations and say, right, I have this mandate. Does that mean that Britain has a much weaker position at the negotiating table?
Well, theoretically, no, if the parliamentarians stick to what was said in the manifestos, because actually both of them committed to leaving the single market and the customs union. But I think they're resiling from that now. You know, the reality is, if you want to control your laws and borders and trade, you have to leave those things. But I don't think people are interested in the technicalities of that. They want a proper British Brexit. They don't want a fudge. And if you go into a negotiation and you're not prepared to walk away, as David Cameron saw when he tried 18 months ago or so, you end up with a really bad deal. You have to be prepared to walk away. And the right way to negotiate this is say, do you know what, we're either going to agree by next March, Q1 2018, or we're going to part as friends and plan for going to WTO rules, because that's the alternative option.
Will, do you think we're in a weaker position because of the minority government?
I think we're in a weaker position so long as our position is unclear, and I think it is at the moment. Richard's not quite right about the manifestos. He's absolutely right that the Conservative manifesto said that we should leave the single market and customs union, and that was rejected by the British people. The Labour manifesto said that we wanted to get as close access as we could to a single market and customs
but
union.
That's also the Conservative position.
Well, they said something slightly different. But the reality now, the important thing is that the election produced a hung parliament, and so now where the majority is in parliament is what matters. And you have the Labour Party saying it wants to have an economy first, jobs first Brexit. You have the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, saying he doesn't want people to be made poorer. And the great risk here is that we do end up on these WTO rules, which would mean very large tariffs for many aspects of our economy. What we have to do is ensure that the deal we get at the end is at least as good as what we've got at the moment, and that we don't have a cliff edge in 2019, which is why I think very sensible people like Sadiq Khan are saying, let's have a transitional arrangement so we stay in the single market.
It's not a cliff edge, it's a springboard of opportunity. WTO is fine. That's what most countries,
I don't think ordinary families will feel
around
that
the
way.
world operate under. WTO rules.